Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Real Talks. I'm your host, David Steele. I hope everybody is having a fantastic day. Happy Father's Day to everybody out there. Happy Father's Day to my father, and I will give him a call right after this. So I just thought I'd put that out there. Anyways, this is going to be a special little spoiler cast. So we just had a movie that came out this weekend that was highly anticipated, and it's been out there for about 3 years now, give or take. And I'm talking about The Flash. It's finally here, guys. It's finally here. It hit theaters officially. It hit theaters on Friday. Previews were Thursday, um, and there had been a multitude of fan screenings prior to that. However, the very first showing of this film actually debuted at CinemaCon way back in March. So, and I don't know if that was a finished copy or not. Nonetheless, they critics and everybody else were the first ones to see this. So, anyways, there had been a number of fan screenings prior to that, and so it just hit theaters on Friday, as I said, Thursday technically for the preview crowd. And I went to see it, and I'm going to be talking all about it. So the way I'm going to structure this, guys, it's going to be a little different. Okay. Um, so this is going to be a spoiler cast in which I'm going to go through not the movie. We all know what the movie is about. Anybody who's read the tease that comes in here, that pops in here, is going to know what the movie is about. By the way, guys, if you do pop in just for a couple of minutes or even a minute, please hit that like and subscribe button. I mean, I know I always say it, but this is the only way this content gets out to everybody, and I really want everybody to see it. So, anyways, back to the movie. So I went to go see it Thursday night or Thursday afternoon, actually. It was a Thursday afternoon, 3 o'clock showing of The Flash. There were about 35 people in my theater. It was interesting, to say the least. I thought there would be more. Anyways, so as I said, what I'm going to do is break this down in a couple of different things. First and foremost, what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to give the intros about it. I'm going to give the financials of exactly what it's projected to do this weekend. Okay. Then there are a couple of stories from the THR. One of them we're going to say do right now after the intro, and the other one we're going to save for later on because it has something to do with the ending. So we'll do that. Then what I'm going to do, guys, is talk all about the characters. Now, obviously, I'm not going to go beat by beat. So, anybody, I should say this again, but just in case, this is a full blown spoiler cast. Okay. So, if you haven't seen the movie, I wouldn't advise watching this until you do and then come back. If you have seen it, you'll know. If you know, you know, as somebody likes to say. So, that being said, I'm going to talk about the characters, the four main characters in this movie. Okay, Ezra Miller as the Flash, Michael Keaton as Batman, Sasha Kali as Supergirl, and Michael Shannon as Zod. And I'm going to talk about what they did right and what they did wrong with each one of them. Then I'm going to talk about the ending and the cameos, and I have a lot to say about that. And there's another whole question of if it's right, is it wrong, what is going on with that. And then finally, I want to talk about the future for DC because I've always said that this film was the final film, if you will, for the reset. Okay, this was supposed to be at its core a complete reset, and moving forward, everything was under James Gunn's purview. So that's how we're going to structure this today. And if you have any questions today, and you do come in, you have any questions, you know, and major questions, guys, and I would never ask this before, shoot me a super chat. I'll be glad to answer them. And, um, you know, we got a huge week, and I got a ton of stuff to tell you by the end. Okay. So as I said, let's kick this thing off, okay, with the financials. And th- this has been something that had been in the out there for almost 3 years. Okay. So it was really the anticipation was building. You had arguably the biggest star in the world saying it's a good movie. You had James Gunn himself saying this is one of the greatest movie, superhero movies of all time. Everything else, okay. So after all of that, okay, this comes from the THR, and it talks about what basically the box office numbers, okay. And it says Ezra Miller's Flash, Pixar's Elemental gets iced in openings. Ugh. Was it such a refrain from across Hollywood as opening weekend's estimates calculated for DC's highly anticipated The Flash and Pixar's Elemental, which are debuting domestically over the long Juneteenth holiday weekend. It's also Father's Day today. Once again, happy Father's Day to all those fathers out there. Starring Ezra Miller in the role, Warner Brothers in DC is anything but flashy in the opinion of moviegoers. The fan earned an estim- the film earned an estimated $55.1 million for 3 days and projected 64 over the first 4 days, notably behind expectations. Some rivals have a 4 day number close to 62 million. Flash had hoped for a 3 day start of at least 70 million, as it's to come ahead of such disappointing films like Black Adam, which collected 67 million in its first 3 days. Overseas, the superhero tentpole also faced challenges. It opened to $72 million from 79 markets, including a dismal 13.8 million in China from a global opening of 130 million through Sunday. The studio's leadership has been hyping The Flash for months, with Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav proclaiming it's one of the greatest superhero movies he's ever seen. Many critics don't agree with that assessment. The pick it currently has a 67% on the Rotten Tomatoes. A bigger problem: audiences give the movie a mediocre B cinema score. As way of as a way of comparison, Elemental got an A. With fans often skewed heavily male, the Flash is usually more than 70% male to female. Box office pundits are divided whether Miller's off screen woes are impacting the film's performance. Miller was arrested multiple times in 2022 and was the subject of several controversies, culminating in the actor issuing a statement in August of last year, apologizing for their behavior and saying they would receive help for, quote, complex mental health issues, end quote. Miller walked the red carpet at the movie's premiere, but has otherwise been absent from doing publicity for the film. In the Andy Muschietti directed film, Miller stars as dual roles as an alternate timeline versions of the heroic speedster Barry Allen, with Michael Keaton and Ben Affleck making splashy returns in their respective Batman roles. In Keaton's case, it's a character he hasn't played since '91, going all the way back to Batman Returns. Sasha Calle stars as Supergirl, while Michael Shannon reprises his role as General Zod from the 2013 feature Man of Steel. DC was heavily counting on The Flash to improve its standing after the tepid showing of Shazam, Fury of the Gods, and Black Adam. Ditto for Pixar, which has Elemental opening this week, but the family film quickly fell flat after the latest blow with the story animated studio. Many pundits worried that the original IP is no longer a theatrical proposition. Also, the former Disney regime had sent several Pixar films straight to streaming during the pandemic. Okay. So just as a closing note, Elemental made an estimated 29.5, and it earned 17 million overseas from the first 17 markets. Okay, let's dive right into this because this in itself is bad. Hello, Kevin. Good to see you here. So Kevin says Warner Brothers' upcoming films Barbie, Aquaman don't turn a profit. They could get sold to another company. I don't think they're going to get sold. What I do think is that Aquaman's in trouble. Aquaman's in serious, serious trouble, and I'm going to get into that whole DC future later on because I think it's a necessary thing. So, first and foremost, what I'll say is this: I had said out of the gate that this film was going to be a litmus test for the, or, Shazam Fury or the Gods was going to be a litmus test for uh, the Flash. I've been saying this for months because if the Shazam wasn't going to do well, how is the Flash going to do? And that was arguably the most anticipated film of 2023 and arguably the DCEU. Um, that being said, it was one of those films that was still part of the last regime, okay, and in the Snyderverse, okay. So it was really, how is this going to perform? And opening weekend was going to be a major, major test for it because you had so many other things coming out. Okay. I mean, you had Transformers, you had Across the Spider Verse, you had Guardians of the Galaxy. And how is it going to respond? So, that all being said, 50, so you have a film here that costs upwards, and from all reports, 250, but let's just say 200 million dollars. Okay. That in itself is a big film. So it's got to make between 6 to 700 just to make a profit or break even. That being said, that's problematic. Couple that with the release date right in the middle of June. Couple that with Ezra Miller's off-screen problems. There's a lot of things going on. Couple that with the writer's strike not being able to promote it. You have a lot of different things going against this film. And then on top of all of that, when you have the CEO of the company coming out and saying, this is the greatest thing ever of all time, with all respect to Dave Zaslav, he doesn't know what a good movie is. Okay. He's a businessman. He is a businessman. He wouldn't know a good film if it hit him in the face. Okay. Now, that being said, film's subjective. I say that all the time, and I get that. But when you're not in the game of Hollywood in film, he's in this for business. He's not in this for films. So, I wonder, James Gunn coming out and saying this is one of the greatest movies. That holds a little bit more weight, but he's the co-CEO of DC Studios. What is he gonna say? No, this film's crap. Of course he's not gonna say that. So there's a lot of things going against it. Okay. So the fact that this only made $55 million, and if we play this out for a minute, now I've always said, okay, that the there were going to be three films, okay, to make um to win two weekends. Okay. The first one was Guardians of the Galaxy, and it did. It won May 5th and it won the weekend of the 12th. The second one was going to be The Flash because it has this weekend and it's going to have next weekend. I mean, I don't think Asteroid City is going to really, you know, shake it up that much. So that's the second film. Now, arguably, Indiana Jones could do it too, but the third one I had said that was going to make to win two weekends is Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part One. Okay. That being said, this is the bigger the opening. So this dropped 36% from Friday to Saturday. So it made about $25 million Friday, and then it dropped 36% and made around $14 million. That being said, this is now with all these, it looks so it's funny because on Twitter, okay, if you guys want to follow me on Twitter, that's my screen handle down there. I'm talking all about films, I'm in spaces, tweeting about films. Okay. On Twitter, on film Twitter, okay, I've seen a lot of people enjoy this. A lot of people. Okay. Some people are going back to see it multiple times. Some people say this is one of the greatest things that they've seen in a while. Whatever. Out in the real world and financial, it only made $55 million opening weekend. And that's a problem when you have a movie that's budgeted 200 to $250 million. Okay. It's really going to be interesting to see. We've had a couple of, it's interesting because this summer has given us a couple of films that have been sustaining, and then there have been a couple that have just fallen absolutely flat. So the ones that have been really sustaining, you take a look at something like a Creed 3, okay? It made $70 million its opening weekend, and it sustained for a couple weeks before something like Ant-Man and the Wasp came out, okay? So that made its money, and then it continued to make its money. Another film that really did well, okay, was of course Super Mario. And that, was actually a top 30 film of all time if you take out that Wednesday and Thursday showing. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it was a top 30 opening of all time. And that went on to make 1.1, $1.2 billion. Okay. And then you've had films that are have fallen flat. And so another one that did well, okay, was Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Now it had a couple of things going for it. Number one, okay, it was the final film in a trilogy. Okay. Number two, it had James Gunn's name behind it. Okay. And number three, it was Marvel. Anything Marvel is going to make $100 million plus guaranteed twice on Sunday, every single time out. Okay. That had legs. That carried, and it made 55 its second week, and it carried for a while. Another film, okay, so let's talk about the films that didn't do well, namely Ant-Man and the Wasp, okay, or let's even go back to DC for a minute. Shazam was a good movie. It was a really good movie to start. Bringing everything back and everything else, it didn't work. It didn't work. And what ended up, and I, said it earlier, what ended up happening was that was going to be a litmus test for the Flash. What ended up happening there, and then you had that whole debacle with The Rock and Zachary Levi and everything else. Okay, that movie fell off a cliff its second week, and now it's on streaming right now on Max. Okay, so well, I'll just say this. Okay, that Shazam was a litmus test, and it fell flat. And second week, it fell off a cliff. Okay. Then what ended up happening was that was going to be how that was going to do. So as it stands, everybody that wanted to see the Flash obviously is going to go see, as that article said, it's primarily skewed male. Okay. This movie and it got a B cinema score. I mean, take that into account. There have been, I mean, Elemental got an A for it. Okay. That being said, I think that it's one of those things that it's it's really tough. It's really tough. I think this film is going to fall off a cliff next weekend. Okay. Now, it might win the weekend, but if it even falls 50%, we're not talking about Avatar: The Way of Water here, guys. If this movie even falls 50%, this is only going to make about 23 or 24 million dollars. If it's lucky. If it's lucky. Um so there is a lot to be said about this. And so okay. So now that I have all that, so we have the numbers out of the way and we have that all. Let's get into the film itself because that's what everybody's here for. They want to know my opinion. So let me talk about the Flash and Ezra Miller to start. Okay, what did I think about them? I thought it was okay. I thought they did okay. They weren't great. Okay, I've seen performances where you know it. They tried to be too funny with him. Okay, they tried to be too comedic with him, even from the get go. Okay, even when in the sandwich scene, they tried to be too funny. Okay, and I think that not. I'm not saying you needed a super serious Barry Allen. I'm not saying that at all. All I'm saying is they tried too hard to be funny because there were jokes throughout the whole film that they were doing that some of them just fell absolutely flat, and I didn't laugh at all. Whether it was him trying to test his powers and walk through a wall, okay, or the whole you know the alternate Barry getting the suit for the first time scene, it just did nothing work. I laughed at things that frankly that weren't funny. And that to me just tells me that, because comedy is all about timing, right? And if you're able to time it right, it it's going to be good. That being said, I have seen much better performances of duality. Okay, I mean, take a look at not the actor. I'm talking about the performance. But you take a look at Arm and Hammer in The Social Network. You take a look at Tom Hardy in Legend. You take a look at there's other characters out there that have played. I mean, Michael Fassbender in Prometheus, where he played David and Walter. I mean, there have been other performances that have been much better than this. And I think that's where it all starts and ends with them. And if it's not good with them, it's not going to be good moving forward. It wasn't the worst thing in the world. Let me be clear about that. Okay? Let me be absolutely crystal clear. They did an okay job. Okay? So and you have to remember too, this was a movie that was supposed to come out in 2018, 19, 2020 before the pandemic. Okay. So I thought they did an okay job. It wasn't anything fabulous. Okay. Let's move to um, Michael Keaton and even Ben Affleck. Okay. So their cameos is what really were driving this movie. Okay. Because I didn't like the performance of Ezra Miller. Okay. Keaton was, I mean, I grew up with the Michael Keaton Batman. Okay. Um, that being said, I remember, I was 13 years old down in Cape Cod when I went to go see Batman in 1989 for the first time, and I loved it. I'm not the greatest superhero comic, fan. I'm not a big comic book fan, but I enjoyed Tim Burton's iteration, and that's what got me into it. Keaton was probably the best part of this movie, okay, because he had a major role. Okay, it was a good supporting character, and Affleck for what he had in it, he was in it 5 minutes. He had that one scene with Barry, you know, in his little place, saying, and it was that even goes to a whole other thing. But I mean, so you see that whole exchange that they have. It's like I can change everything, and then Affleck says, or you can destroy everything. And it's one of those things where you knew he was going to do. You knew Ezra was going to do it. You knew Barry was going to do it anyways. And so that was the other thing I didn't believe at all. Okay, is the whole Iris thing. I didn't believe that whatsoever at all. That to me was just put in there because they needed to try to have Barry have some sort of love interest or possible love interest. That didn't work for me at all. Okay. And she was in a couple of scenes, and it just even the scene when she goes back to his apartment, and he cleans it all up, and then she says, "Oh well, it's tighter than I thought," and then of course everything spills out. I mean, the punchline there was just horrible. So I didn't care for that at all. I didn't think no, she was a good in what she had. I'm not just okay. I'm just talking about there was no chemistry there at all, and I didn't care for it. That being said, that didn't work for me either. Michael Keaton was the best part of this movie for me personally because I enjoyed it. Affleck had one scene in it. That's it. And then, he gets in that fancy car, okay, which by the way, my guess is probably about a $250,000 automobile. And she walks up and says, "Nice car." You know, you must have rich friends. I mean, so the dialogue didn't work for me. Keaton was the best part of this for me, hands down, hands down. So I was really happy to see him, and I loved how they introduced him. So once the two berries figure out, okay, they've got a plan. They go into Wayne Manor, and they're trying to figure out, what's going on, and they finally find Bruce. I loved how they introduced Bruce Wayne in this with the hair and, you know, the spaghetti. And by the way, that was a really cool way to introduce how the multiverse works. Okay? That was very very clever. I enjoyed that a lot. Okay. So Keaton was the best part of this for me. Okay, Affleck really, he had his one scene and that's it. Let's move to Sasha for a minute. Sasha is a very good actress. Okay, she's a very good actress. And I felt like what they did with her in this film was not enough. Okay, I don't want to say it was shoehorned in, but the way they put shot her in there as Supergirl just didn't work for me. Okay, and I liked her as a character. Okay, I liked her as a character, but they didn't give her enough to do. Okay, it was just like, okay, she's going to be part of the team because we can't get Henry Cavill and he's all done now. We're just going to put her on the team. And so they go to Russia and they go and they try to find where she is, and then they get her out. Okay, and there's that sequence when By the way, that was a cool sequence when Batman is dropping down the thing, and then he's the bulletproof cape and everything else. That was a cool sequence. I thought that was well done. Um, that being said, once they got her released, and once they took her back to Wayne Manor in a safe spot and everything else, okay, so that works. But she didn't have enough to do in this movie, in my opinion. She really, really didn't. And I don't know, excuse me, I don't know if that was deliberate, okay, because they're bringing her back for the Supergirl movie, which is going to be several years down the road, or if that was just the way it was written. I hope not. I hope it's the prior more than the latter. That being said, I think that she didn't have enough to do. She didn't have enough to do there. And the final one, okay, and I don't have a picture for this off the top of my head, but I want to talk about General Zod. And this is really the battle, so we'll just keep this up there. But the whole Zod thing was, I mean, even Michael Shannon had come out and said, he just basically did the film for the money. He said it was like moving action figures around a board and playing with action figures. Okay, he even went to Zack Snyder and got his blessing before he actually signed on for this. I just it didn't work for me. I mean, Michael Shannon's character. Don't get me wrong, he was very good. He was very good in Man of Steel. I just didn't care for him in this. And it wasn't his fault. It was what he was given. Okay, and you had some of the replays of like the television shot when they, excuse me, when they go into the bar and they see Zod's face on the television and everything else. It just so once the battle happens, there's no lead up. Like you don't even see him talk to any of his proxies. I mean, have a scene, okay, at least where he's talking with a couple of his generals on the ship, okay, or saying, I hope this time is different, this, and this, something. But it was like he was just thrown in there because he was General Zod and he was good in Man of Steel. That's all. So that was something that really bothered me too. There was no character development there. I'm not. You say, well, you don't need it because you got it in Man of Steel. Sure, but at the same time, have him talk with his generals. You know, have him. We need a little bit more there. Put a little more meat on the bone. So I think that was a problem. Okay, now what I'm going to start doing is yeah, there were a couple of cool scenes. I have to say. First of all, when they're in the Batcave, I'm not gonna lie. I got put a smile on my face. when they're in the Batcave and you see him take off the thing for the 1989 Batmobile, that was cool. When you saw him step out, and by the way, it was much better in the trailer than it was in the actual film when he's like, "Yeah, I'm Batman." It didn't, and it was the same thing. It was the same thing in the movie too, where she, where he actually came out and said, you know, you want to get nuts? Fine, let's get nuts. And I just, it didn't. That whole thing didn't work for me. Um, and it was just context because it just didn't work. So there were a couple of things that really um, bothered me, and I'm gonna just okay. So that was that one. Hold on, guys. But yeah, it basically. So as I said before, I mean, going back to and here's another shot. So something that really, as I said, I enjoyed Sasha as Supergirl. I'd like to see her come back and play Supergirl again. Um, but this, I got to touch upon the CGI real quick. The CGI, and they had years to develop this and do this. The CGI was some of the worst CGI I'd ever seen in my life. I mean, it rated right up there with Thor: Love and Thunder. I mean, that is how bad the CGI was. And it just, when you have so much time to refine things and do things and everything else, um, that's where I have a problem with it because it should have been done that much. It should have been done much better than it was. Okay, so I'm going to start talking about something that really, really rubbed me the wrong way. And so, so what I'm gonna start doing is I'm gonna move on to the next thing. Okay, and that was the cameos. This drove me nuts, nuts. And the reason I say that is because we've seen movies that have done it very, very, very well. Okay. Namely, No Way Home. If you want to put a cameo in there, that's fine. I don't care. But when you start to inundate it with cameos and really say, okay, so we're going to do this because we own this, um, that's when it becomes problematic. And so I just, the whole Helen Slater, Christopher Reeve thing did not work for me at all. Okay. And, even George Reeve, no, didn't work for me. Okay. And by the way, got to rise out of the audience, which is great. I mean, this to me felt like fan service at its core. Basically, one of the other cameos they did was at the very end, and let's just move on to the ending. Is George Clooney. So once we get Barry back and everything else, and so the other Superman. By the way, the other Superman. Um, I should say the other Superman that they decided to put in there was even for a split second, and it got a huge rise out of the crowd, was Nicolas Cage. And that whole image, because so anybody who's not familiar with it, many, 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 many years ago, Nicolas Cage was actually going to play Superman, and Tim Burton was actually going to write and direct it. And so it fell through, so that's why they put the image in there. So getting back to it, one of the other cameos that didn't work for me was the ending. And let's talk about the ending for a minute because I think that really needs bearing. So this whole film is based off of Barry Allen, okay, going back in time to try and stop his to exonerate his father for his mother's murder. Okay. And so that's when the he gets put into the other universe and then everything ensues. Okay. So once everything is corrected, okay, or we think everything is corrected, then, he gets to the courthouse, okay? He gets exonerated. By the way, we never find out who murdered his mother, okay? So that's something in itself. And so, which the other thing that really irked me while I'm on it is if you're going to do this, and look, I understand the scheduling and everything else, have the same person for Barry's father. We see him in two shots the whole movie. We see him in the shot in jail, and then we see him in the shot in the court. That's it. That's it. You're telling me you couldn't bring back the same actor? You have to go get somebody else? That irked me. Okay. So once he gets to the courtroom and everything else, and he gets exonerated and everything else, he gets a phone call from Bruce Wayne, and we think it's hey Bruce, how are you? Glad to hear your voice. Blah. I'm pulling up right now, and George Clooney walks up and with a great beard and everything else, and that leads you to believe, okay, he's not in his universe still. So you know, it just didn't work. There was just too many cameos. Now, all that being said, you can do cameos. Look at what happened with No Way Home, and everybody knew it was coming, and the story was written so well, and I had a serious problem with that. And I mean, forget about. Let's not even go into okay the first scene or the first 15 minutes of the film when, by the way, the majority of it is CGI. Okay, shoddy at best. And then there's that whole hospital scene, okay, with all these babies falling down. I mean, I guarantee you there are memes right now on the internet about this. And, he puts one of the babies in a microwave and he's running low on energy. So, he's making a burrito. And I'm just like, oh my God, are you kidding me? But this is what they were resorted to. I went, this is horrible. So he saves everybody, lines them up on the gurney and everything else, and everything's supposed to be hunky dory. I just went okay. So, but moving back to the ending there, that George Clooney character or the cameo didn't work for me at all. So, I mean, they had three different Batmans in this. Okay, they had Chris, or they had. I'm shocked they didn't have Christian Bale actually, but they had George Clooney, they had Michael Keaton, and they had Ben Affleck. So it really didn't. It really didn't work at all. And so, yeah, that's how. So as the film ends, and by the way, there was a mid-credit scene or post. I just walked out. I didn't. There was something for Aquaman or whatever. I totally missed that. I heard about that later on. But so I want to go back to the other cameo real quick because, and this is as I said, this was just one of them. I mean, we had Helen Slater. Okay, they had Nicolas Cage. They had George Reeves. Okay, and they had um I think they even had they had, now that I go back and think about it, they had Adam West. They had Adam West as Batman. So all of that being said, it brings up some interesting ethical questions, okay? Because we are in a culture right now where AI is big, and CGI, our technology, has exponentially getting better and bigger. And so there has to be a discussion about whether or not. And look, Tom Hanks said, a couple months ago, I even covered it on the channel. Tom Hanks had come out and said, well, they can use, AI even long when I'm gone. And he's right. Because we have things out there, deepfake things, that can not only simulate somebody's body movements, okay, but their voice. So you could have a Christopher Reeve do that. The question is, there's a couple of questions. Number one, is it ethical? Okay. Number two, is it right? And number three, is this future? So let's tackle the first question real quick. Is it ethical? Now, when an actor or actress signs on to do a role, doesn't matter if it's Christopher Reeve playing, Superman, or George Clooney playing Batman, or Ezra Miller doing The Flash, or whatever, they are under contract to that studio. Okay, their job is to basically learn the lines, come in, be prepared, act, and get the best performance, and that's why they pay them. Okay, it's a job at the end of the day. And when an actor or actress passes away, okay, it's one of those things where, do they still own that? They own the IP in Superman, okay, they own that, but do they own that particular actor or actress's uh, performance? So I didn't know this until the other day. Do you know who owns the life rights to Marilyn Monroe? Shaquille O'Neal. Somebody told me that the other day. So, that being said, is it ethical or tasteful to have a performance by an actor or actress after they've passed away? It's a very slippery slope, because if we start to do this, where does it end? Now, the one reference I can really think of off the top of my head, okay, is Rogue One. So you had two different performances. You had the Peter Cushing, okay, and then Carrie Fisher. Now, Carrie Fisher was still alive, I think, at the time, but she was unavailable. Okay. That being said, okay, they used a very, solidified um, image of her. And it was just that little simple shot of her moving her arm to insert the plans into the R2D2 robot. And Cushing, it wasn't any dialogue there, but, you saw him standing next to Darth Vader. So there is a difference between just an image, okay, and then there's an actual performance, okay, when they start to give dialogue. And listen, we have things right now, guys, that imitate and will emulate performances, voice performances. That being said, is it ethical? Let's move on to that. Is it ethical? Okay, just because you own an IP and just because you own a character does not mean you should be able to do this. Okay. And I really wonder if Andy Muschietti had any recourse of this. Now, it's one thing to do a cameo. Okay. It's one thing to have a George Clooney come in and act, because granted, he just walked on screen. Okay. But it's one thing to do that. Okay. But he's an actor, so he can articulate different things. His voice can be different, whatever. There's a difference there. When you do it for somebody like Christopher Reeve, who's no longer with us, that becomes a little strange, because eventually what you could have is AI bots doing acting. And at that point, it would be easier and cheaper for these studios to go generate a, I don't know, a George Clooney, okay, to walk on screen and not say anything, than actually hire the actor for, let's say, $250,000 for one day, right? Because it's all about money at the end of the day. And when you have a budget like this at 250 million dollars, it really starts to eat into your costs. I would love to know, and we'll never find this out, how much it costs all of the VXF companies to actually produce those images of Superman and Helen Slater and Adam West, who, by the way, is still alive. Keep that in mind. Adam West is still alive. We are starting to get into an age of likeness. Okay. So, anybody who's not familiar with this, okay, um, it's been probably, I don't know, 5 years now. So, there is something called the NIL. Okay. And the NIL, okay, was and is something that um, basically for many, many years, okay, athletes were, they were never, collegiate athletes were never paid. They were never paid. So it doesn't matter if you're biggest quarterback in, University of Nebraska or this bum at, UNLV, okay, they were never paid because they were collegiate. So John says Adam West died. He did? I stand corrected then. I stand corrected then, John. Okay. I thought he was still alive. You're absolutely right. He died. He passed away in 2017. I stand corrected on that. So that being said, it's still one of those things where is it ethical? And I think that just because you own the IP, does not give you necessarily the right to do that because it would really be strained and everything else. Um, yeah. So overall, okay, were there things I liked about this movie? Yes. Okay, I loved the Michael Keaton stuff. I thought Sasha did not get enough to do. I thought Ezra was okay. I thought they tried way too hard for comedy, and it's a mess. Now, here's an interesting piece. Speaking of the ending, and I wanted to bring this up because it's necessary. So this came out the other day from the Hollywood Reporter, and it said inside the Flash ending, the cameo secretly was filmed 6 months ago. Okay, so now this obviously contains spoilers, but this is a spoiler cast, so Hollywood secrets have been notoriously hard to keep, but Warner Brothers and the filmmakers of The Flash pulled off a doozy with the final moments of the DC film. After more than 25 years, George Clooney returned to the role of Bruce Wayne, marking a remarkable change of heart for an actor who is unequivocally done with the role. It was a secret that the studio was able to keep tight for close to 6 months. In a mic drop movie move, one in which left Ezra Miller howling, the Flash's final scene shows Barry on the phone with Bruce Wayne. The phone call comes after the climatic courthouse hearing, and he returns to his own Earth and timeline. Wayne pulls up to the courthouse uh, in his car and gets out. As the crowd assembles to part, Wayne walks, played by Clooney, not the Affleck one he expected. Clooney infamously played, Bruce Wayne slash Batman in the Joel Schumacher ill-fated 1997 Batman and Robin, which is considered one of the worst superhero movies of all time. The actor is reputed over the years with one of the misses of his career. He told Howard Stern in late 2020 that it was physically painful to watch the role in the work. Said of the actor, the truth of the matter is, I was bad in it. Speaking of Batman and Robin. Uh, Akira Goldman, who won the Oscar for writing it since then, he wrote the screenplay, and it's a terrible screenplay. He'll tell you, I'm terrible in it. I'll tell you, Joel Schumacher, who passed away, directed it, and he said, yeah, it didn't work. We whiffed in that one. So it goes on to say that he was an actor, but this wasn't the only ending. And this is something key. It was also the third ending, okay? It was the third ending for the film, okay? Um, that was crafted for the film, whose director, Andy Muschietti, had on three separate regimes for Warner. The Flash served as a study of a movie that survived and evolved in a rapidly changing media landscape, facing the dictates of several studio heads and multi-billion dollar acquisition. The Flash began life under the studio regime from Tony Emmerich and the Lieutenant Walter Hamada, who was actually an EP on this. Most of the shooting and post was undertaken under that leadership, with the movie as part of Hamada's plan to have the Flash be a major reset for the entire DC cinematic universe, departing from the one that established Zack Snyder with Man of Steel a decade ago. Well, okay. Hamada then planned a Flash sequel and wanted to move a movie into um, the 1980s classic comic event Crisis on Infinite Earth. The Flash, which was originally conceived and shot, ended on the courthouse steps with Supergirl, played by Sasha Calle, and Batman, played by Michael Keaton, who were originally featured throughout the film as a returned Batman. It was meant to highlight that Barry did not reset the timeline as he thought. It was an ending that screen tested several times, one that reversed the deaths of Supergirl and Batman early in the film. However, the movie got caught in a lightning storm that was Discovery's acquisition last year. Emmerich and Hamada were ousted, and David Zaslav was on the hunt to lead an executive to run DC. In the meantime, Michael DeLuca and Pan Abbey were also installed as chairpersons and CEO. They were tasked with overseeing DC in the meantime, and suddenly, uh, certainly not expected and having their own place. A new Flash ending was conceived. The new version was still on the courthouse steps, but Callie Supergirl was now joined by Superman, played by Henry Cavill, and Wonder Woman, played by Gal Gadot, who, by the way, makes a 5 minute appearance in this movie. She was another cameo I wasn't talking about. Keaton also remained. DeLuca and Abby believed that they were being strategic with the ending. Cavill was going to cameo for DC's Black Adam, which was going to be tee up for the new Superman movie. Supergirl was retained because through the executives were killing the development of a standalone Supergirl movie. They were open to returning in some form and didn't want the last image of the audiences to be her death at the hand of General Zod. So it's fascinating. Since then, it's fascinating. Okay, so Antonio says, personally, I love seeing George back with the right script. He could be one of the best in the role if done right. I agree with you. I mean, look, every actor has those roles that just don't work. And you have to remember, he was a big name at the time. I mean, he was just coming off of ER. I mean, he was a heartthrob, right? George Clooney was a sex symbol, you know, and I mean, he was named one of the sexiest men in the world. Okay. I agree with you, Antonio. If it's done right, okay, that it could be interesting. I mean, don't forget, that was the same movie you had Poison Ivy, okay, played by Uma Thurman, and Mr. Freeze, played by one Arnold Schwarzenegger. Okay. That being said, the fact that they had three endings for this film, three different endings. I mean, so it's either door number one, door number two, or door number three. And they had to settle on something. And that goes to show you something. Okay. Zaslav's doing what he did in buying Max, okay, or Warner Brothers or Discovery, whatever you want to call it, okay. He completely changed the landscape of this whole thing. Had this film gotten released with one of those two endings, it would have been a huge buzz, right? He could then have taken it, bought it, and then scrapped the whole thing. But you got to wonder. And I think the fact that he had three different endings and he did that, I mean, still, I mean, you know, Batman and Robin was better than the Flash and the Batman. Um, hmm, I'll, that's a tough one. I think I think the Flash was better than Batman and Robin. I think if anything was better than Batman and Robin. I mean, that was more of a campy, um, you know, just out of bounds type of crazy with Arnold and Uma, and I mean that was a sequel, obviously. Better than the Batman, though. I gotta give you a little pushback, John. The Batman, the one thing Matt Reeves did with the Batman, okay, the one thing Matt Reeves did with the Batman is that he used all of the different elements, okay, all of the different Easter eggs to his advantage, okay. So, for example, the car that Bruce drove up into the funeral with was straight out of the 1966 television show. When Alfred's opening the mail, you see that statue head. That's straight out of the television show. Okay. The scene with the Riddler at the end of the film. Okay. That's straight out of the Dark Knight. You know, um, the action. You had the Heath Ledger like type of villain in the Joker, except in the Riddler. Okay, I thought Paul Dano should have been nominated for an Academy Award. That really, it was a dark, gritty. I mean, rain too much, but but it was dark and gritty, and it was going right after the Nolan type of films. So he did that. I will say one thing though. The third, I can see, and I liked the whole film. People have said, well, it's a little tough in the third act. And I could see that, right? In the final sequence in the like Madison Square Garden. What Matt Reeves did is not only did he take Easter eggs from that, okay, but he showed us a different Batman. Okay. So for example, what ends up happening is the fact is that we had never seen a Batman like that. Ever. So I'll get to that comment in just a second, Antonio. Let me just finish my thought. The thing is that we had never seen a Batman like that. We had always seen a grizzled Batman that knew what he was doing, whether it was the Michael Keaton Batman, whether it was the George Clooney Batman, whether it was the Val Kilmer Batman, whether it was the Christian Bale Batman. The other thing he didn't do, which I think is key, is he didn't go through the whole. We all know how Martha and uh, his father died. They were shot in the alley. He didn't show us that, and I think that was refreshing. But I can see where you're coming from. What I loved about the Flash was how it honors three generations of Batman: Burton, Schumacher, and Snyder. I love that. Yeah, and it did. It really did because one of the things that made this film great, I think the Batman cameos I didn't have a problem with. Okay, everybody knew that Michael Keaton was going to be in this. Everybody. I mean, and that was another problem I had with this film. Was you bring that up, Antonio? That's a perfect segue, and I totally agree with you on that. Is the press one of the major failures of this film? Okay, is that the lack of press of what they did with this film? Okay, because number one, you had an embattled star in Ezra Miller. Okay, number two, you had the writer's strike, which didn't help matters much either. I'm not that's not their fault. Okay. Number three, you showed way too much in the trailer. I mean, we got three trailers for this film. Okay, the last one being almost 3 minutes, and it showed everything, everything. And I think that's a problem when you show that much footage. I've seen the movie. I've seen the movie. Okay, I've seen Supergirl. I've seen the cameo by Affleck. I've seen both Ezra's or both Barrys. I've seen all of this stuff. There's not much left to tell. And look, I understand trailers are supposed to, market and everything else. But if you had only done two trailers for this movie, and the hype was already through the roof, it would have been that much better. I think too, speaking of marketing, when you have people like Stephen King coming out and Tom Cruise coming out, that's a bad sign. That's a very, very bad sign. because Stephen King's a great author and I love his movies. I'm not disputing his adaptation of movies. I'm not disputing that. What I'm saying is I don't think he's really in touch with the last 20 years of superhero movies. Okay. Beyond the Flash, I'd love to know how many superhero movies he's actually seen. Okay. Tom Cruise. Yeah, he called Andy's team up and said, "Hey, listen, you did a great job with this. Congratulations and everything else." I gotta wonder, which leads me to the final point of this whole thing. So, Andy Muschietti, it was just reported last week that he is now going to be spearheading the new Brave and the Bold Batman movie. This is going. So now I'm going to start touching into the future of DC. So we've got to wonder. So he signed a first look deal with Warner Brothers. Okay, huge deal. So he's going to be developing things for not only their streaming platform, but his films. So we've got to ask a couple of questions here. Number one, okay, if this film did this poorly, what are they going to do in the future? I mean, we know the project that he's going to be spearheading, like I said, is The Brave and the Bold. It's a different Batman, sure. Um, is it going to underperform? Now, we don't know any of this. I got to say that up front. This is purely all speculation, but I'm taking it from what we have right now. Okay. So, number one, is this going to be fall flat? Okay. Number two, he also is something he's developing for streaming, okay, and Max in Welcome to Derry. Okay, that's about the whole It prequel. I mean, we'll find out more about that when that whole thing hits. But is he going to have too much on his plate? Okay. And or is he going to do that and then is he going to do Brave and the Bold? And if he does, we're talking 4, 5, maybe 6 years down the road. Okay. Because my guess is that this is why Batman Legacy is going to be so incredibly important. So what ends up happening is that if I was about to call it Batman. So Superman Legacy, that is why he is doing what he's doing with Superman Legacy. Okay. Um, it's one of those things where it's absolutely necessary to have this work. This is why Superman is going to be so incredibly important for them moving forward. Him getting the job for the director, um, him getting to the director for, I'm sorry, him getting the job for the director still excites me personally. His Batman stuff was phenomenal, especially the Keaton part. I'm quite excited. I hope he gets his chance to shine, actually. Yeah. I mean, also, speaking about Schwarzenegger a while back in an interview with Empire in 2012, he said that he didn't regret the film, just like Uma. Personally, I think he still does. Yeah, it's one of those things where some of these actors and actresses, no, that's a great point. That's a fantastic point, Antonio. Some of these actors and actresses, so you have to look at film in two ways. The first way you look at film is the here and now, okay? And the second way you look at film is, down the road. And if you're able to do that, then if you're able to, okay, if you're able to do that, okay, then what you're doing is you're being able to, hey, Metal, how are you? I hope you had a good weekend. I hope you're having a fantastic Father's Day. Um, yeah, so what ends up happening is Superman Legacy, what I'm getting at is this. I agree with you about that wholeheartedly. Actors, so they look back at this stuff, right? and they go, "Man, you know, I can't believe I did that all those years ago." So yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I think, I mean, you have to be able to do campy stuff every now and then. That shows what kind of actor you are. But when we look at acting, at least when I look at acting, I look at two things: the here and now, and 5 years from now. And I've always said this: how is this film going to be received 5 years from now? Is it going to be a bust, or is it going to be something that people go, "That was a really good movie"? Because there are plenty of movies out there that people don't necessarily like now, but they love. I mean, the Justice League is a perfect example, right? The Justice League is a perfect example of that. When that came out, that should have been $1 billion film from Warner Brothers. By the way, it was not horrible, but it didn't do as much money as it should. You go look at that Rotten Tomatoes; it's done really, 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 really well, especially with the Snyder Cut. And the Snyder Cut is huge. The Flash is okay, 8 out of 10, no more, maybe less. Yeah, I think that it. Look, I'm ragging on this horribly. It's not because I'm not a DC fan. I love all movies. But for where I was sitting, I had a problem with some of the stuff, and I've walked through some of that stuff. But moving on to the legacy stuff, this is why James Gunn wanted to do this stuff himself. Because if he could get off to the right start doing this, I really think they have something going. Okay. And this strike, believe it or not, is a blessing in disguise for them. Because what will end up happening is that it will give people more time to actually move on from this, and they'll get excited for Superman Legacy and all this other stuff moving forward from DC. It makes me really sad when actors regret roles. I think they should look back in a positive way. Plus, the reason why I love the Flash is gives a second chance. Yeah, I mean, look, I think that once you get to a certain point in your career, okay, it's it's one of those things where you go, "Oh, why did I do this?" or "Oh, why did I do that?" But I think you can look back on it. You know, I mean, it's one thing to lose out on a part. I mean, Nicholas Holt, and right now he's a front runner possibly to play Superman in Superman Legacy. Lost out on some of the biggest parts in the world. Okay, he lost out on the Batman. He lost out on Mission Impossible 7. Okay, and he's done, but he was fantastic in the menu. And I think he's now starting to get the roles. But looking back on it, I think it's just a matter of perspective. To your point, Antonio, um, Clooney, look, he only got a small, small, small snippet, and that's fine, and that's fine. And I think that that's all he did was walk in the frame. But yeah, it's one of those things where I think the later you get in your career, the more you look back on it, and it's just a matter of retrospective. That's why I say when we look at film, there's two different types of way of looking at film. Right, is the here and now, and you know the second is how we look at it in the future. And yeah, so that'll. I'm ready for Superman. Love Jim. Yeah, I have faith too. I really do. This is why I have everything he has done to this point has been banger after banger after banger. Whether it's the Guardians of the Galaxy, you got to remember, guys, 2014 was a huge year for Marvel. Huge year. And it was one of those things where nobody had ever known who the Guardians of the Galaxy was. And it was it's he made those people. He made the Guardians of the Galaxy cool, right? He made them cool. Whether it was Rocket or Peter Quill, he made them cool. And that is one of the I mean, talk to any Marvel person, okay, that has seen all Guardians of the Galaxy is in the top 5 or 7. of all time, of all the films. Okay, because the story was there. Then when you have, he so you were talking about Empire earlier, Antonio. He actually came out and made a quote. I'm going to get to this in just a smidgen. He said, "Look, the first film was about the mother, the second film was about the father, and the third film was about themselves. James Gunn knows how to tell stories. I have faith in him too. One thing that bothers me in Hollywood is when they delete stuff, sequels. They should they should look like a little a little harsh. Studios try to fix things with the next one and not just delete. So the thing is, okay, at the end of the day, that I did a whole podcast about this a while back. It was called Reboots, Remakes, and Sequels: The Three Things That Drive Hollywood. Unfortunately, you're only as good as your last movie. You take any director, right? Doesn't matter if it's Spielberg or Muschietti. Okay, you're only as good as your last film. Sequels are so difficult to make. So difficult. I mean, good film is difficult to make in itself, but to make a great sequel, it's hard. And that's why, I mean, I've covered a few of them on my Perfect Movies series, guys. And by the way, if you want a cheap plug, if you want to go back and watch some really good sequels, go check out my Perfect Movie series. I go in depth on some of them and why they are perfect movies. Now, film is subjective. I understand that, but you'll understand why I think that. I mean, the two I can think of off the top of my head, or the three I can think of off the top of my head, is The Dark Knight. I think it's a perfect movie. Okay. The Godfather 2. I mean, it's right neck and neck, but we see one. It was one of the very first prequels, if you will. Okay, with um, Robert De Niro, and he's told the story of Vito, and it mixed in Michael, and then of course the 1980 Empire Strikes Back, hands down. So I mean, right in there is Captain America: Winter Soldier, and I've done two of those movies for perfect movies. So I understand what you're saying. Sequels are so difficult to make. He's asking Kevin all the time about stuff. What do you think I should do here? I'm considering doing that there. So he's getting it from the master. I mean, if you want, you got the master the master and the Padawan. So Gunn is just starting to do this stuff. I think he'll be fine. But as I keep going back to, this is why he wanted to do Superman by himself. Because if he didn't, then because look, here's what it comes down to. If we go into 2025, assuming it's going to get its release date on 2025, let's say 2026, and Superman Legacy busts, and it's a film that people don't enjoy, oh no. They are in serious, serious trouble. I'm not saying they're in, but I mean, they're in trouble now, but it's one of those things where, look, because that's what's that I don't blame him for the Flash. I don't. I really don't. Blue Beetle is going to be the first movie in this whole new universe for him. Okay, and if everything after Blue Beetle does not do well, I mean, I'm even talking about the new Aquaman. Wow, I mean, Aquaman right now, from what all reports are from all the trades, saying it's a mess. I agree with you with what you say. You always have the films, but it's not like the Thanos snap and you lose the DVDs or Blu-rays from your collection. After all, Volume 3, I'm more open to James Gunn Superman. Yeah, this is what I mean. He's a great storyteller. He knows how to tell stories. And he's the most transparent studio head you'll ever talk about. Ever. I mean, he hasn't been on recently. Social media, he basically shuts down any rumors. He's transparent. He knows what he's doing. If that happens, that's just going to let us know what all the other movies are going to do. I'm already kind of nervous about Creature Commandos. Yeah, I mean, so like I said, it's one of those things where this is why everything is hinging right on Superman Legacy. because if Superman Legacy doesn't do what it should, it's gonna be a lot of people that are gonna be very, very, very worried. A lot of fans are gonna be very worried. And it's one thing to do animation; it's another thing to do live action. I mean, we haven't had I don't know off the top of my head, but it's been a while since we've had the last live action um, Superman movie, Man of Steel. It would probably be Man of Steel. So we're talking 10 years, guys. We're talking 10 years. It's been for a Superman movie. That's a long time. So you know, I mean, but I think overall, this movie didn't do what it should have, and it's now going to be what happens from now moving forward. So I think, you know, it, so I said it before and I'll say it again. I always have said that the litmus test for Shazam was going to be a litmus test for the Flash, right? Shazam didn't do well, and we just saw what the Flash did this weekend. My guess is it's going to, if I had to guess right now today, it's probably going to fall off a cliff, so to speak. Not that I think it should. I'm just being realistic, okay? Um, it's going to fall off a cliff. So coming up, we've got a huge, huge week and rest of the month coming up. Um, so we've got a huge week coming up. Actually, Secret Invasion is starting on Wednesday, guys. This is going to be monster. Everybody has been. This goes back to that um, end sequence of Captain Marvel and everything else. So here's the plan, guys. Moving forward for next week, Monday, you guys are going to be getting a show. Okay. Tuesday, show. Wednesday, Secret Invasion. I agree wholeheartedly with you. Secret Invasion is going to bring people back. I totally agree. This, from what I've read, and I haven't read a lot, they're saying this start to has Captain America Winter Soldier vibes. So, yeah, and it's only 6 episodes, which I think is good. Okay, I hope they're 45 minutes to an hour each. Wednesday is going to be um, show. Thursday is going to be Secret Invasion Thursday moving forward. So, guys, watch it. Come back here. We'll talk all about Secret Invasion. Okay. Friday until the middle of July, you guys are going to be getting another Mission Impossible. I just did Mission Impossible 3. Go check that out if you haven't already. That's probably one of the best ones. It's going to get better. Next week is going to be this upcoming week is going to be Ghost Protocol. The week after that's going to be Rogue Nation, and the week after that is going to be Fallout, and that's going to lead right up to the 12th. Um, Movies, theatrical movies. So, guys, we had the Flash this week. I'm going to take a week off from the spoiler cast, but on the 30th, okay, absolutely, I'll be doing an Indiana Jones in the Dial of Destiny spoiler cast. So come back for that. Then in July, I'm gonna be doing, as I said, Oppenheimer, Barbie, Mission Impossible, all of those, and we're gonna have a lot of other stuff. So, um, couple of things, and I remember seeing an emails. Yeah, yeah. So E-Man is, and I actually was speaking to. I would love. I'm gonna try and get him on the show, or he's a really he's a fun guy. He's a really fun guy, and so Um, definitely want to. There's a couple of things a couple of people I want to try and get on. I've been talking to, so he is definitely one of them though. So I'd like, as the bottom says, you know, I'm just starting out, so you could, you can do a couple of things to help me out here. And by the way, Meadow and Coco are fantastic. he says, Coco says the way his teeth just fell out. Yeah, that was, it's like a mic drop type of thing. Okay, cuts to black. But yeah, no, that was once again. I think this film tried too hard with the humor. There were things I laughed at that I just that weren't funny, and vice versa. But yeah, that one was humorous. So there's a couple different ways you can support me, guys. And Coco and Metal are already members. So number one, hit that join button. Okay, there's three different levels. I actually added a couple. There's three different levels. One is $2.99, one is $5.99, and the other is $9.99. And you're going to be getting a couple different perks with all those. Okay. Number two, super chats. I anybody that can give me any super chats, and I'm not begging. I'm just saying they're appreciative. Okay, I absolutely appreciate everything. Okay, I appreciate you guys being here. Okay, because you guys are the foundation of this channel. So super chats, love them. Thank you very much. And finally, so there's another thing, Patreon. Okay, head on over to my Patreon. I'm going to be recording probably this weekend, maybe later today. We'll see. Mob Mondays. So there's two levels on there: Mob Mondays and Rewatch Wednesdays. Mob Mondays is $5 a month. You guys are going to be getting another Mob Monday or another mobster movie. I just watched Goodfellas. I'm going to be doing things like Scarface, The Godfather, you know, Black Mass, all of those. One of those a month. The other one is $10 a month. Rewatch Wednesdays. These are films I've watched that I haven't seen in a while. So the first one up there is Steve Jobs. I've I have Training Day right around the corner. I've watched that. I'll be doing that. And then finally, the store guys. If you want to go, I mean, today's Father's Day or just any time, there's mugs, there's t-shirts, there's jackets, there's hoodies, everything there, men's and women's apparel. And that's going to help me out greatly. So, quickly, Metal says, I understand that would be awesome if you did. I understand that would be awesome if you do a show. Yeah, so I'm going to stream the rewatch. So if you guys are lucky enough, and I'll put this there, but if you guys are lucky enough to actually watch it, you can see it for free. Otherwise, that stuff, Mob Mondays and rewatch, is only exclusive on Patreon. That's it. So, and you're a loyal member already. So, thank you very much. And I'm gonna have to start putting a little thing on there for members. Once we start to grow the community a little bit more. Antonio says, The Flash and The Dial of Destiny are my two most anticipated movies of 2023, so I hope they do well. Flash, I don't know now, so it's going to be up to Indy to battle now. Yeah, and Indy is. Look, the thing about Indy, I'm dying to see Harrison Ford back. Okay, I think that it's going to be fascinating. It was a calculated risk by Lucasfilm to put that in cans. It really was because that did not do well. And when that didn't do well, people got kind of turned off. The other thing about it was that it cost $295 million to make. So, I mean, it's going to have to make a lot of money. It's still the best one, in my opinion. Yeah. I mean, when it's done right and when it's done well, it's fantastic. Right? So, I think that, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But this is the wave of the future, guys. I mean, you got Chat GBT, and this is why the writers are fighting so hard because they don't want to get replaced. They do, they don't want to get replaced, and I think that that's a big. I don't think they will ever get replaced. If it's done as a tool, that's fine. But when it starts to become more and more and more, that's when things start to, you know, really be problematic. So. But okay, so as I said, this week, Monday show, Tuesday show, Wednesday show, Thursday Secret Invasion Thursday, Friday Mission Impossible, and then no spoiler cast because there isn't going to be anything big, and then The end of the month is going to be Indiana Jones. And so for the next 6 weeks, guys, every single Thursday, there's going to be no show. We're going to do Secret Invasion. We'll talk all about Secret Invasion. Friday, up until the middle of July, you guys are going to be getting a brand new Mission Impossible. Perfect movies. Um, I just did The Dark Knight. Speaking of Batman, I did that is the perfect movie for July or June. I don't know what it will do for July, but it will be another big blockbuster. I think is there. I have to admit, though, I teared up when Christopher Reeve and Helen Slater joined him. It was sad that Chris is dead. I think he would have liked that, maybe, but we finally saw him on screen together. Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I understand why they did it. It's a great tribute. It really, really is. Um, and it was just for that split second. Um, I mean, maybe, and you know what, guys? I know I'm being critical of this right now. I got to go back. Maybe I'll go see it again, and maybe my thoughts will change. But right now, with this spoiler cast today, this is how I feel. And because look, my opinion has changed. The reason, okay, when I watch a movie, I watch it the first time I do it just to absorb the material. The second time I watch a movie, I will absorb the material, but I'm picking out little things I may have missed. The third time, it's not background noise. Still, I will always pick out little things that I missed. So that could absolutely be the case there, Antonios. So yeah. So that's gonna be it. But yeah, so as I said, Mission Impossible Fridays, and then you know, would you ever do a perfect movie for Schwarzenegger or Stallone like T2 or First Blood? Um, I think Terminator 2 is if I were going to do one for it would probably be Terminator 2. The reason I say that is because Cameron is he is one of the greatest filmmakers of this generation. I mean, I think if you've got a Mount Rushmore, right? Okay, you've got Spielberg, Scorsese, okay, Coppola, and Lucas. They really changed the industry for what it's worth. Cameron, if I were going to take anybody out of there, it would probably be Lucas because he's not directing. I mean, the last film he directed was Phantom Menace in '99, so you're talking 24 years ago. But the thing is that Cameron has changed the industry for the better. So you go '97, he does Titanic, okay, which was it. By the way, guys, that was one of the first films that was an epic film. Like that was a 3-hour runtime. One of only a few films to win over 10. I mean, they're all tech, but over 10 Academy Awards. Okay. Then you look at, and you can even go back to The Abyss back in '88, '89, right? With all the imagery and, one of the coolest, I will say this, guys. If you have it and you haven't watched it yet, sit down and watch the IOM documentary. It's a 6-episode documentary. It's fabulous. So getting back to that though, um, so then you go to '91, right? Only a couple years later. So he does Terminator in '84. '91, you really have the emotion, okay, in Terminator 2. It's a sequel. It's one of the greatest sequels out there. And you've got a strong female lead. You've got a strong female lead in Linda Hamilton. So yeah, I mean, I would, you know what? I'll sit down and rewatch T2, and I will definitely take notes on it, and I will get back to you on that because I think that could very easily be uh, put on the list for that. I'm definitely going to rewatch it. I don't rewatch films on theaters, but some deserve it, like Endgame, which I love. I love Endgame too, or Terminator Genesis was such an incredible experience for me. That's fascinating because, and I haven't seen Genesis, but Genesis, the and this is why I say, guys, film is subjective because Antonius loves a film in Genesis that, I mean, if you go and so I'm going to do this right now because I'm interested and curious in it. But getting back to what I was saying, that is a film that is like one of the um that is one of the films. So and by the way, I'm so glad you enjoy that film. I'm so glad you enjoy that film. I haven't seen it, so I can't stand to it. But this is why I say film is subjective. On Rotten Tomatoes, I'm curious, Antonius. I'm going to ask you a question real quick. Do you know what the rating is on Rotten Tomatoes for that movie? What I love about modern films is that we see old franchises back or old actors returning to iconic roles, and you get the chance to build memories your parents never had. Yeah, I've always said film is the first time I see a film, it's a memory for me. I can tell you every single time I saw a film for the first time, it was a memory for me, and who I was with, and where I saw it, and how many, So quickly, um, Genesis, that film you were just talking about that you love, and I'm so glad you do. And I haven't seen it, so I don't know. On Rotten Tomatoes, okay, it has a 26%, okay, and 277 reviews, and a 52% on audience, and that's with over 50,000 ratings. That's awesome. You love that movie. That's awesome. Yeah, you're right. It is 26%. Yeah, and 52% audience. And here's something else. So I'm actually gonna plug a podcast. So I recently just did a podcast, guys, and I'm sure you can find it on any of your favorite podcasting things. It was something called Bad Movies We Love. Okay, and Nick is the name of the host of it, and so I just sat down. Speaking of Schwarzenegger, I just sat down. I did an absolute guilty pleasure of mine in The Running Man. I love that movie. I'm a big game show host geek. I love that movie. Guys, go check that out. As I said, it's called, or you can follow him on Twitter. So let me put it in the chat for you guys. That is Nick's podcast. That is, you can go find me, find the podcast I did on The Running Man with him there. But he talks about bad movies, and obviously he knows what he's talking about. His film is subject and everything else, and they're like cult classics almost, right? Like Terminator Genesis, like The Running Man, like all these other films, and they're guilty pleasures, right? But yeah, no, absolutely, I agree with you on that because films are memories, right? At the end of the day, you remember your first time. So he says Terminator Genesis was the first Terminator movie I saw in theaters. Saw it 3 times. What an honor seeing Schwarzenegger in the role again. It was probably my best memory. I saw Dark Fate twice. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a great, it's an iconic role. Him playing the Terminator is an iconic role. Also, the Terminator. I love the Running Man. I love the Running Man. So I, being an '80s kid and everything else, I love game shows. And Richard Dawson, I remember Richard Dawson growing up on Family Feud. So when I was just, it's an amazing movie. First movie I saw in theaters was Four Brothers with Mark Wahlberg. Yeah, that's a deep movie. I remember I saw that years ago. It's a deep movie. That's a deep, deep movie. But yeah, movies. So I mean, I remember who I was with. I mean, I was 13 and I went to a drive-in with my mother, and I saw, it was a double feature, and I saw Silence of the Lambs and I saw Dances with Wolves in one night. I mean, talk about juxtaposition. Um, I remember one of my old friends. I went to see Brooklyn's Finest. You know, my brother. I went to go see Hereafter, the Matt Damon film. I mean, I remember where I was when I went to a midnight showing of Phantom Menace back in '99. I remember, I went down to this theater right down the street here and saw the Avengers for the first time. Endgame. So I mean, absolutely, your point is well taken, Antonius. Movies are memories, and that's the important thing. You always remember where you saw something, always. So, but yeah, so that's so as I said, keep. So if you guys want to support me, and we have a couple of members, people in here, and I thank you very much for that. Um, Absolutely. My father saw End of Days in theaters in '99, and I was always kind of jealous that I didn't have that experience. So seeing The Last Stand, his return in action was special for me. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds like you're a big Schwarzenegger fan, which is awesome. It's funny because he just turned 75 a couple months ago. So, starting, I mean, I know he's got that new movie on Netflix called Fubar, which I've not seen, but yeah. So, but okay, guys. So as I said, ton of stuff coming up. You can either uh, support me one of the two ways or multitude of ways there, or we got a ton of stuff coming up on the channel. Go check out the perfect movies. Go, you know, if nothing else, guys, hit that like and subscribe button because what that's going to do and make sure your notifications are on, and that way you get notified every time I go live. Um, and yeah, so this is going to get bigger, hopefully, and grow and grow and grow. And I can't do this without you guys. And I hope that you tell your friends about me and, have them stop by and everything else. So, yeah, and last comment uh, another great film of, oh, I love Eraser. I love Eraser. I love Eraser. Schwarzenegger is one, yes, he is. He definitely is. His story is one of a kind, too. So, okay. All right. There's too much stuff on my computer, so that's why this thing slows down every now and then. But in any event, so do the three things that you need to do, guys. Be safe, be careful, have a great Father's Day, and a great rest of the weekend. And I will see you tomorrow. I'm David Steele, and you have been watching Real Talks. Bye bye, guys.